Our next speaker, Randy Benson, is the director, producer, and editor of The Searchers, which is a great documentary if you haven't seen it. His work has garnered numerous awards, most notably an Academy Award for Best Student Documentary from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Benson received an Eastman Kodak Excellence in Filmmaking at the Cannes Film Festival and a first appearance at the International Documentary Film Festival. He has been an instructor of film and video for the Center of Documentary Studies at Duke University for over a decade, and he serves on award juries at the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival in Durham, North Carolina, and the Let's All Be Free Film Festival in London, UK. Let's bring up a great guy, Randy Benson. Give him a hand, please.
All right, well, thank you so much, and I want to thank David for putting on this shindig, and want to thank everybody in the room for coming out, being here. I want to thank David Knight for pulling this all together, making it work, and I want to thank everybody out there in the hinterlands of the interwebs for tuning in. So, my presentation tonight is the JFK assassination, what we know and why it matters. And this is a presentation I give to lay people at libraries, at schools, to people who don't know much about the assassination other than just an interest in history, and most of them have questions that they don't know what questions to ask. So I'm the director of The Searchers, finished in, it was a 14-year process, and a massive, over 60 hours of interviews, and I'm telling you this because I'll get to this at the end of the presentation. But the film had a wide reach for a film in our field of study. It had a pretty wide reach, and I was really glad it went to some film festivals and won some awards, and so it had a really good life. I'm very proud of it. Okay, on to the story. This is, again, this is for a lay audience. Here's what the official story is. On the 22nd November, '63, JFK was shot and killed as he rode in a motorcade in downtown Dallas. A former Marine with supposed communist leanings, Lee Harvey Oswald, was arrested later that day and himself killed less than 2 days later by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. The new president, former VP Lyndon Johnson, convened a special investigation into the assassination, heading off a number of local investigations, which became known as the Warren Commission after its chairman, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren. The report stated in its conclusion that Oswald acted alone in murdering JFK, and his murderer, Jack Ruby, also acted alone in avenging JFK. However, almost immediately following the assassination, and in many cases immediately following the assassination, a small community of citizen researchers identified errors, contradictions, and holes in the Warren Report, as well as subsequent investigations by committees and the subcommittees of the U.S. House of Representatives.
People were demanding that a second investigation be opened up.
And that, of course, created a real powerful blast to create the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which probably the first phase of the House Select Committee under Richard Sprague was as close as a Kennedy assassination ever got to a real actual murder investigation.
And however imperfect it was, it did focus renewed attention.
That House committee, our United States Congress, comprised of Democrats and Republicans, came to the official conclusion that the Warren Commission was wrong and that there was a conspiracy involved in the assassination of President Kennedy. That was the official finding.
With a probability of 95% or better, there was indeed a shot fired from the grassy knoll.
Good evening. A congressional committee has concluded that President John Kennedy and civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., both of them, were probably killed as the result of conspiracies. The House Assassinations Committee wound up its 2-year study by recommending that the Justice Department look into both cases.
The news item of the century, cracking open, and no further discussion, no specials, no hour-long expose, just now for the sports.
The final report of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence available to it, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of conspiracy. That's the last official government proclamation on the assassination. Now let's flash forward to 1991.
At the end of Oliver Stone's award-winning film JFK, at the suggestion of researcher Robert Groden, he included a final comment saying that the files regarding the Kennedy assassination were still locked away. There was a groundswell of response, and Congress got thousands, if not millions, of letters saying that these files should be released.
Mr. Garrison's
But when this came, there was a momentum. The act was passed in 1992. The Freedom of Information Act from 64 to 94 maybe got a few thousands of pages. Since the passage of the JFK Records Act in 92, the archives and the different agencies have been forced to release over 6.5 million pages. It's one of the largest record releases in history of the United States, and it's a model that we need to be using for the Martin Luther King assassination, for the 911 Commission records. The spin put on at the time, even by the review board itself, was, well, we released all these files, but there's nothing there.
And CIA Director Robert Gates announced today that he plans to make public secret files on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Weekend Update has already obtained one of the files. This document seems to confirm the Warren Commission's finding that Oswald did act alone.
So I want to make sure everybody realizes that that title card in the movie JFK was suggested by our very own Robert Groden, sitting right in front of us. As a result of JFK, Congress passed the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, which created the I'll really get through this, I promise. The Assassination Records Review Board, a panel to review all the files and to determine which ones would be made available to the American public. The act was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush on October 26, 1992. All government agencies were ordered to retain all documents pertaining to not only the assassination, but to the entire Kennedy presidency. However, in its very first meeting, the U.S. Secret Service informed the review board that it had destroyed all documents, all their documents. The review board noted this in its final report, however, decided not to pursue a contempt of Congress in their first opening days of the review board. Right there. The Secret Service destroyed all its records. When the review board wrapped on September 30th, 98, a massive 6.5 million pages of documents were placed in the JFK Act collection in the National Archives II in College Park, Maryland. Only the Nazi and College Park II, Archives II in College Park, had to be built to house the JFK Records Act collection. Only the Nazi records collection following World War II secured more documents. There were so many documents that an Archives II had to be built. Under congressional order, all documents were to be released in full, completely unredacted, no later than 25 years after the passage of the JFK Records Act. That date was October 26, 2017. In 2016, then-candidate Trump stated on multiple occasions that he would ensure the release of all documents during his presidency. In fact, the National Archives released approximately 3,000 pages in June of 2017. In September 2017, the CIA announced it would release a 7-volume collection of documents pertaining to Lee Harvey Oswald. Researchers found that one entire volume had been destroyed by the agency. The CIA has declined comment. 7 volumes and one is gone. In early October 2017, 300 more pages were released. Then, on October 25th, 2017, one day prior to the congressional deadline, the CIA, the FBI, and the Pentagon appealed to President Trump to stop the release of an estimated 350,000 pages of documents stating national security. The president acquiesced to the intelligence agencies and extended the deadline 6 months. Therefore, all documents were due to be released in full no later than April 26, 2018. And there's the announcement by the National Archives. On April 26, 2018, 19,045 pages were released. I know a lot of people who have downloaded all of the recent releases since 2017, myself included. A lot of hard drives, right? To the astonishment of most researchers, in a one-page memorandum, President Trump then ordered that the remaining documents be locked away until October 26, 2021. So, on October 22nd, 2021, President Biden again delayed the release of the documents, stating, quote, "In light of the agency's proposals for continued postponements under the statutory standard, the documents shall be withheld until December 15th, 2022. Again, another sitting president continues to hide the remaining documents based on national security concerns. So what's in the files? Dave Denton gave a great presentation on recent releases. Again, this is what I show people who are not well versed in the assassination.
The bill before us today, S.J. Res. 282, the title is the Assassination Materials Disclosure Act of 1992.
When the review board convened in 1994, they instructed other federal agencies to hang on to their records because they were going to be demanding them and processing it for declassification.
The Secret Service, the day that they were supposed to turn in their materials to the review board, they destroyed them and said, they're gone. We don't have them. We destroyed them.
That was illegal under the Act. Any record, once the Act was passed, nothing was to be destroyed.
The review board was apoplectic over this, but in the end decided not to make a big public stink in their first year of operation against an agency like the Secret Service. And so they noted it in their final report that this had happened and left it at that. That's for real. One thing you won't find in the documents is the magic secret code that says the government knows who killed Kennedy and here it is in our 40-page report. That's not how things worked. There's huge varieties of interesting clues along the way, some of which just go nowhere, some of which lead you to other things. And then there are the occasional eye-popping moments. One of them was early versions of the Warren Report, which had been written in draft form and presented to commissioners.
It is the view of the commission as expressed in the report that it probably did occur that there was a single bullet conclusion.
So the single bullet is crucial. And it was Arlen Specter who first came to the conclusion that the same bullet hit Kennedy and Connolly. And this is the bullet Spectre and the Commission say wounded 2 men. The Warren Commission said that one bullet hit Kennedy at the back of his neck. It passed through his throat and nicked his tie as it came out. It then went on into Governor Connolly's back. Now smashed through Connolly, smashed a rib, and came out below his breast, just below the nipple. And it wasn't finished yet. The bullet then hit his right wrist, tore through part of it, and then lodged in his left thigh. And this is the bullet that was supposed to have done all this.
The single bullet theory says that the bullet came through Kennedy's neck, didn't hit any bone, went right on down, hit Connolly, caused all of his wounds, and that way they can have all of these wounds attributed to one bullet, and then they got the one that missed, and then they got the one that hit Kennedy in the head. So there's your 3 shots, and you've got to have 3 shots to make the single assassin theory work. If there's a 4th shot, then we're into conspiracy and multiple shooters.
Gerald Ford himself, the future president, had written in changes to the descriptions of Kennedy's wound in an early version of the report.
Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. We said that the commission had found no evidence of a conspiracy, foreign or domestic.
He actually changed the text in the report to move the wound in JFK's back to a position at the base of his neck, which is very significant for the simple reason that if you raise the entrance wound to the neck, you of course make the single bullet theory more plausible.
And that one small change of wording is what has allowed them to argue that cockamamie single bullet theory.
These guys were very conscious of the problems they were having, you know, with the trajectory of this magic bullet.
People ask, why do you have Arlen Specter, Gerald Ford, and Emmett Kelly together? Well, they have one thing in common. 3 clowns.
And it showed that the Warren Commission was willing to fudge the wording to make their case seem more plausible.
The House Select Committee on Assassination said, well, we've gone and interviewed the witnesses at the autopsy, and it turns out that the doctors in Dallas were wrong. All the witnesses at the autopsy said that there was no hole in the back of his head and that his wounds looked just like they look in the autopsy photographs. Where are the interviews? We'd like to see them. Well, they didn't come out until the Assassination Records Review Board released them in the early mid-1990s. And guess what? The witnesses at the autopsy described the wounds exactly as the witnesses at Dallas had, that he had a hole in the back of his head. So the House Select Committee on Assassination had falsified his own interviews to be consistent with the autopsy conclusions that they wanted to reach, that Oswald could have done it. They lied. You couldn't even trust the pro-conspiracy House Select Committee on Assassinations to tell you the full truth.
Another set of documents that was found, which is quite an eye-popper, is the so-called Operation Northwoods documents,
which was a plan by the Joint Chiefs to create a traumatic incident that would terrorize the public and then could be blamed on Castro and could be then used as an excuse to invade Cuba. And this involved
shootings on the streets of Miami and Washington, D.C.,
blowing up a ship in Guantanamo Bay,
blowing up a drone airliner and pretending that it was a real airliner over Cuba in such a way it could be blamed on Castro,
with fake obituaries sent to the local papers.
These would be orchestrated in sequence as part of an effort to blame them on Castro and to be used as a pretext for invading Cuba.
The rush to judgment was really the beginning by J. Edgar Hoover, who that day said Oswald did it and did it alone.
Among those records is a document on the afternoon of November 22nd after the shooting, but well before any full-scale investigation or conviction or anything else happened. J. Edgar Hoover wrote a letter to his investigative staff and called Robert Kennedy and said, we have the man that shot the president and there's nothing else behind it.
This is the president of the United States. A lot of people had reasons to kill him. How can you say the first day there was no conspiracy? You can if you start with the preconception that we're going to say Oswald did it alone and we don't care what the evidence shows.
Another important record that came out was a memo from Assistant and then Acting Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach, to Bill Moyers, who was a press aide to Lyndon Johnson. The memo said that the public needs to be convinced that Oswald acted alone, that the evidence against him would have convicted him in court even if he hadn't been killed, and that there was a lone individual acting on just his own behalf. This was a memo on November 25th, the day of Kennedy's funeral and burial.
These documents didn't just sort of fall one day from the sky. They were dug kicking and screaming out of federal agencies.
We know now from the documents there was basically a COINTELPRO operation against the researchers to discredit them, to try to back up the phony conclusion, lest it go where it would go.
The CIA wrote out a lengthy memo to station chiefs all over the world.
The CIA document is number 1035-960. And 1035-960 talks about how they're going to counter the works of people like myself by using propaganda assets in the media.
They certainly viewed public's disbelief of the Warren Report with concern and provided point-by-point rebuttal points.
We're all communists, we're all in it for the money.
One of the mentions in this document is that they should label these people conspiracy theorists. It's the beginning of the etymology of those two words being joined at the hip, so that now we're in an era where there is no conspiracy that isn't a theory.
It's a very, very powerful and important document. It shows how they did it.
Okay, so this is the Gerald Ford document. As you can see, he moves it from the back, the bullet hole from the back to the back of the neck. Next slide. This is the Katzenbach memo. Noting that the public must be satisfied that Oswald was the sole assassin. Next, please. This is CIA document 1035-960 that Robert Groden presented in my film. Countering criticism of the Warren Report and creating, this is the very first time the phrase conspiracy theorists entered American lexicon. Next slide, please. This is the Hoover memo on the 22nd of November, '63, that Oswald acted alone, the afternoon of the assassination. Next, please. Now, this is NSAM 263, JFK to withdraw U.S. troops from Vietnam. This was written in October '63, and as you see at the bottom, it says, I'm reading it from upside down here, to withdraw 1,000 U.S. military personnel by the end of '63 and a full withdrawal by the end of '65. Next slide. This is National Security Memorandum 273, where Lyndon Johnson, the new president, reverses 263, approves escalation, and authorizes unrestricted, unrestrained covert operations. In October, this was in November '63, right after the assassination, one of his very first meetings. This was the Vietnam War in this document. So one of Kennedy's last actions was to end the Vietnam War. One of LBJ's first acts as president was to escalate. Next slide, please. This is a document that was found by researcher Joseph McBride. J. Edgar Hoover document that George H.W. Bush was Central Intelligence. I can't see it on on here, but he states that Mr. Bush of the CIA had been briefed about the assassination. The problem is that officially George Bush wasn't in the CIA until he was appointed CIA director by George Bush Sr. Sorry? Oh, yeah, right here. Next slide, please. This is CIA document 143492Y, Clay Shaw, CIA asset. Traces on the subject have been run. I'm sorry, I just can't see this from down here. But this document states that Clay Shaw, Jim Garrison. Clay Shaw was the, as everybody in here knows, was the main defendant in the prosecution of Clay Shaw by Jim Garrison in New Orleans. So, next slide, please. So this is the McCone Rally document, and this is a very controversial document within the research community. It was written by Chief of the Secret Service James Rowley to McCone, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Sorry? From McCone to Rowley. To Rowley from McCone. Thank you. In this document, it states that, that Lee Harvey Oswald worked as a CIA agent. Many researchers, now the fact that this document was found in the National Archives is virtually undisputed. It came from the archives. Its authenticity has been debated. Sometimes a researcher who's passed away now told me that if it seems too good to be true, it usually is. And one of the interesting things when looking at documents is that there are surrounding documents that verify them. So many times a document will say, in regards to your memo of 2 weeks ago, here's the information you requested. Usually the previous document can always be located, and so there's a trail of evidence and authenticity for each document. As far as I know and other researchers I've spoken to, that the surrounding documents to this memo haven't been found yet. That doesn't say they don't exist, but whether Lee Harvey Oswald worked as a CIA agent, not many of us disagree with that. Whether it's included in a document, right now the community is split. Next slide, please. This is a photo that was uncovered by Frontline in the 90s that shows the David Ferry circled on the left and Lee Harvey Oswald circled on the right, that they were together in the Louisiana Citizen Air Patrol, the CAP, Louisiana CAP. This is very significant because it was always told to us that David Ferry and Lee Harvey Oswald did not know each other, that they'd have no relation, no connection at all. But here's the photograph that shows that they're together. They were in the same unit. Next, please. So this is a secrecy agreement that one of the documents that was released, a secrecy agreement between the U.S. government and Dallas Mayor Earl Cabell. Now this gets, Earl Cabell was the brother of Colonel James Cabell? Charles Cabell, thank you. Who was the deputy CIA director under Allen Dulles. The significance of this document is that the Dallas mayor he swore an oath of secrecy to the United States government prior to the assassination of President Kennedy. And one of the important points of the assassination, a huge question, was who changed the parade route, and was it changed at all? So as you can see here, next slide please. As you can see here, this is Dealey Plaza. The parade route came down Main, took a right turn on Houston, a left turn on Elm, slowing down, and proceeded down Elm under the triple underpass. This is Dealey Plaza. The original parade route had them going right down Main. But the parade route was changed to bring it right under the Texas School Book Depository and into this perfect little nest of a fire range right here, of a shooting gallery. Next, please. So this is a clip from the Dallas Times-Herald Evening Edition, November 21st, 1963, the motorcade route. And if you see, it says, the motorcade will travel on Mockingbird Lane, Lemon Avenue, Turtle Creek Boulevard, Cedar Springs, Harwood, Main, and Stemmons Freeway. It was not going to make a turn. Next slide, please. The morning of the assassination. Dallas Morning News, Morning Edition, November 22nd, 63. From Love Field to Mockingbird Lane, along Mockingbird Lane to Lemon, Lemon to Turtle Creek to Cedar Springs to Harwood, Harwood to Main, Main to Houston, Houston to Elm, Elm under the triple underpass to Stemmons Expressway. That's when it was changed, overnight. Skip this. Let's go 2 forward. Now this is November 23rd, 1963, the call slip from Dallas County Jail documenting a call from Lee Harvey Oswald to a Mr. John Hurt of Raleigh, North Carolina, my neck of the woods. And next slide, please, and you can play that video, please.
On the evening of November 23rd, Lee Oswald, supposedly a lone nut, with no connections to anybody, doing this for his own reasons, decides that he needs to call John Hurt in Raleigh, North Carolina. John Hurt, who incidentally had been a special agent for the United States Army Counterintelligence Division.
This is Dr. Grover Proctor of Cary, North Carolina, the foremost researcher into the Raleigh call, what's become known as the Raleigh call. And that slip is yet another piece of documentation to prove that Lee Harvey Oswald was much more than he appeared to be, than we were told. Next slide, please. We are being watched. The documentation to that, next slide, please. CIA Action Memo 95-144-7145, monitoring the researchers. TZ Fresh, CIA agency, sending personnel to cover Rio meeting of JFK researchers and will photograph participants. And if you could see down there, which you can't, they mentioned Cyril Wecht, Jim Lazar, I apologize, I'm trying to see the names on this little screen. Wayne Smith, and this was from what years? I'm sorry. But this was released in the JFK Records Act. So, my experience, the South Regional Library in Durham, North Carolina. So, as you'll see here, the South Regional Library in Durham, North Carolina. That's my library. Last time I gave this presentation, it was right before the pandemic, and it was only published in our little library's newsletter that everyone gets when you go to the library. You just pick it up and go, and it was on the library's website, not the Durham County website, just the South Regional page. And I had arranged just to have a little conference room for this. When I got there, they had put me in the big room where we vote, where they have all the voting machines. So in the big room, they had hundreds of chairs lined up, and the room was filled. I was giving just the JFK assassination, what we know and why it matters. The place was filled, and I ran through this without this little bit that I'm telling you right now. And two people came up to me dressed in black afterwards and said, "Hi, we're from the National Archives, and we drove down from Washington, D.C. For your presentation." And of course I said, "Well, do you have a card?" And I keep this card with me. National Archives and Records Administration, FOIA and Privacy Officer, Office of General Counsel. I keep this with me. Then I asked them both if they wanted to stay for a beer, because I had a lot of questions. And they said, no, we have to get right back to DC. So they drove from College Park, Maryland, 3.5 hours to Durham, North Carolina, South Regional Library branch for a talk by me to just some community members, and then got in their cars and drove right back. Is that not insane? But they're watching us. I mean, next slide, please. So why it matters.
We can ill afford to let our history die. The effect of the national security state and all this propaganda is that our real history has been stolen from us, hidden from us. And without knowing our history, we can't act. Martin Schatz, an early critic, wrote that the political paralysis in America is based on the fact that we're allowed to believe anything, but to know nothing. And when you can't know, you cannot act.
The past is prologue, and until we understand what's happened and what we did do right or wrong, or what we didn't do right or wrong, it's very hard to have a barometer to know what we should be doing in the future.
In the larger picture, I think we're still in this funny conundrum where, even though more and more at least has come out in detail showing the fraudulence of the official version of events, it hasn't changed what's in the history books and you name it. And in fact, if anything, as time has gone by more recently, there is enough distance from the event and few enough people remember the facts of the case that it's easier to argue the Warren Report all over again because people don't know what was wrong with it in the first place.
The world would have been a very, very different place had Kennedy not been assassinated. Many people think, well, why are you talking about this case now? It's ancient history. Well, it's not. It's still relevant today. Things which are happening today stem from incidents like the Kennedy assassination.
The predominant paradigm in this country is that things happen due to incompetence, not malice, not evil. And that the government is basically benign. It may hurt someone inadvertently, but it would never do something as outrageous as kill its own president. But there's other paradigms out there.
This was a coup d'etat. This was the overthrow of the government. Something that we as Americans can accept, even without question, in Western democracies.
We got people running for office now, and they're talking about assassinations yet again. People should not believe that if you kill the president, that's okay, you can get away with it. It's not like anything serious, like stealing a loaf of bread.
More important is the lessons we can draw for today around how an event like this can have misinvestigations by the federal government take place, and then how the rest of the organs of society can line it behind them.
So what's next? What's next for me? Next slide, please. I am in the process of just starting to create a sequel to The Searchers Part 2. And the working subtitle right now, "The Time Has Come to Restore Our Nation's Honor." I like that laugh. It started. I'm starting to collect interviews again. And this is part of the larger Searchers project that collecting interviews for posterity, making them available to other researchers, to the general public, and to create another film that will hopefully get some traction and bring more people and younger people into the world of the research community and to our real history. So, next slide, and I'd like to conclude my presentation. And I thank you so much for sticking around, and thank you everybody on the internet. Sorry? Come on. To what you did? Come on. Oh, shit.
I got a couple of things to back up what you said.
Oh, okay.
Just a couple of things I wrote down because to back up everything he was presenting there. The day after the House Select Committee said there were two shooters because of the acoustics thing, the Washington, I have the exact quote, but I think I left it at the hotel. The Washington Post put out an editorial that basically said, so what if there were two shooters? They may have been there at the same place at the same time, not knowing each other by coincidence. That's how they handled it. Number two, you mentioned Gerald Ford there and the moving the wound. Gerald, when Agnew got booted out, and Ford was about to replace Agnew, he had to go through a process there to, approval of him. And he was asked by, I think it was Senator Howard Cannon, who obviously knew that Ford was guilty, otherwise he wouldn't have asked the question. And he asked him, did you ever publish anything that was classified you shouldn't have? When he put out his book, Portrait of the Assassin, which basically said Oswald did it, his editor didn't like it, that he wanted something juicier. So he published the minutes of the January 27th, 1964 meeting where the Warren Commission discussed whether Oswald was an FBI informant, which I mentioned briefly. It's a dirty rumor and we have to wipe it out. He published it, and he didn't even publish it correctly. He edited it, so he bastardized it. So he dishonestly published it. And when he published it in 1965, it was not declassified until 1974. And then when he was up before the Senate to be cleared for vice presidency, he was asked, did you ever publish anything? You shouldn't have. He said, I think he used to my best recollection, so you know he was going to lie right there. And then when he finished, he said, no, we never published anything that was classified. When he was saying that, it was still classified for another 7 months. Weisberg didn't get it for another 7 months. So Gerald Ford published top secret documents without permission for personal profit. And how did we punish him? We made him President of the United States. Okay? He mentioned the rough draft, the NSAM 273. And the important thing of that is that that was escalating the war. We went basically from 14,000 to 565,000 men in Vietnam. And the date of that is November 21st. So the question that Prouty was bringing up, which John Newman disagreed with, was, were they anticipating Kennedy's murder the next day and preparing the escalation ahead of time? That was the question. That's debatable. I sued through the Freedom of Information Act to get the rough drafts of the rough draft, and it had handwritten, and I forget the guy's name. It wasn't McNamara, it was one of those other guys. He had a brother, and it was his handwriting, so Prouty was accusing him, dealing with me, that he was part of the thing, and of course I don't know what it was. But the November 21st thing causes trouble. The CIA Bush thing, there was a judge, George Bush in the CIA, and he was contacted, I think it was Joseph McBride who contacted him and said, he said, I was in the CIA, but I wouldn't get into agency documents. In other words, the FBI would never send me anything. I'd get strictly CIA stuff. So he said, it's got to be the other George. Okay? The McCone-Rowley thing, I think the person who first put it out to the public was named James Richards. I could be wrong, but I think that was the name. And he sent it out, and somehow it went to a friend of mine named Bill Cheslock, who's a researcher who's not well known. He sent it to me, and then I sent it to Tree Frog. And then Tree Frog sent it to the world. And these guys went down to the archives and couldn't find it. There were no numbers. And immediately some people, I won't name them, immediately thought that Cheslock and I were disinformation agents spreading shit. And I just got it and sent it to the guy that I knew would give it to somebody who maybe could find out whether it was true. Well, I'm not guilty. I just thought I'd say that on the record. And he showed the picture of Ferry and Oswald together, the Civil Air Patrol. The founder of the Civil Air Patrol was D.H. Byrd, part owner of Link Temco Vault, where Mac Wallace worked, owner of the Texas School Book Depository, close friend with Lyndon Johnson, a Del Charo regular under Clint Murchison. And I'm probably leaving out 10 other things. And some of his documents, there's some library somewhere, they're still classified. They still haven't released them. There was a meeting to play around with the motorcade route, and it had all these rich Texans from the Dallas Citizens Council there. The main one was Eugene Locke, and he was close to Johnson. He made him ambassador to Pakistan, then ambassador to Vietnam. He was close to, let's see, what else we want to tell you. Another guy that was at that meeting, and he was left off the list, was Robert Strauss. Strauss was chairman of the Democratic Party, close to Bush, close to Jaworski, close to LBJ, close to Conley. You get the idea. Thank you. There you go. Thank you. Yeah.